Given October 9th, 2007, a BC Recordings copyrighted presentation by Stephan Hoeller entitled The Battle About God, Where Do Gnostics Stand?
The topic this evening is an unusual one, and certainly one to which I very seldom address myself, at least as a separate subject, and that is really the subject of God, and as we might even say at the present time, the battle about God, or the battle of God. You may have noticed when looking through the current literature that in recent months, probably the last 6 months or so, not much longer, there has been a proliferation of literature, and some of it of a fairly serious nature, that attacks the concept of the deity, and that is promoting, when all is said and done, pretty much a philosophy of kind of time-honored, good old-fashioned atheism. So just like there is the old-time religion, there is the old-time atheism. And among these, I think a particular distinction belongs to the book by Christopher Hitchens, God is Not Great, which of course with his British wit is a takeoff on the noted Muslim exclamation, Allahu Akbar, God is great. So Christopher Hitchens came along and said, no, he's not great. But it is addressed not only to the Islamic deity, or it doesn't treat only of the Islamic deity, but really treats of deity in general, at least, and this is the crucial part, I think, of our entire discussion. It treats of the deity as envisioned in the mainstream and majority religious milieu in the West. That is in Europe, in America, in Australia, in New Zealand, and places like that. And I have looked through the literature, and I have a considerable liking for Christopher Hitchens, particularly because I think he's a very witty man, and he's also more than a little learned. You know, he is the I think his principal claim to fame is that he is one of the editors of Vanity Fair magazine, but he also writes regularly for the Atlantic Monthly, and has written several books and all that sort of thing. He's a very, very individual, very independent thinker. In any event, I looked through his book. I also looked through another one that is a major book in the field by Richard Dawkins, which carries on primarily a scientifically oriented argumentation. And I must say that I have not found much in these books that could be considered new. What may be new, however, if the trend continues and if it gathers any kind of momentum, is, I think, a giving voice to an underlying dissatisfaction with the central core of Western religiosity, namely its God concept. Now, we have seen evidence of, let's say, dissatisfaction with various aspects of the religious tradition of the West, Judeo-Christian or otherwise, in this case Islamic too. We have seen now for a number of decades a dissatisfaction with what some feel, with a greater or lesser justification depending on the case, on one-sided and excessive masculine emphasis in Western religiosity and Western spirituality. That was one. We have found a dissatisfaction with the unwillingness of the religious circles to seriously look at the early history of the Christian faith and to address themselves perhaps seriously and with some degree of open-mindedness to the scriptures which have come to our attention over the last half a century or a little bit longer, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Gnostic Library. The signs of this dissatisfaction have been evident to us in many ways, and probably one of the major explosions of an interest arising from that dissatisfaction having been a couple of years ago the almost unprecedented success of an otherwise really rather sleazy book, namely Dan Brown's Book of Renown. Let's just put it that way. Once again, when we subject that interest rather than the actual subject matter to an informed analysis, indicates that there is a profound distrust of the official and mainstream teachings of religiosity in the West, and that there is a considerable willingness to consider alternatives of various kinds. I don't need to tell you that for an even longer period there has been a tremendous change in the ultimately religiously motivated rules of behavior and mores of the West, resulting in all sorts of things. Certainly it would have been very hard to imagine even, 25, 30 years ago, that previously so greatly religious countries as, for instance, Spain, other European countries would have legalized same-sex marriages, and many other changes in the common mores of society. All of this indicating that there has been a diminishment of respect for many aspects of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and that from many different angles, as it were, many different trajectories, the mainstream manifestations of the Judeo-Christian tradition are under assault. This is not quite as evident in the United States as it is in many other countries of Western culture, because the religious circles have indeed, if anything, gained in power, in the intensity of their convictions, and sort of the psychological point of gravity, we might say, has shifted in the United States from what for a long time have been the established mainstream denominations such as Roman Catholicism, Methodism, Presbyterianism and Episcopalianism, and has shifted to denominations which either weren't even around a few years ago, at least not by their present names, or at least were very much of the marginal variety not very long ago. Most of these denominations call themselves fundamentalist or at least evangelical. Now, I don't know how many people are aware of the origin of the term and the concept of fundamentalist. It's very quickly stated, so it doesn't hurt to refresh our memory. It actually goes back quite a ways. In the early part of the 20th century, there was a considerable tendency in some of the mainstream Protestant denominations to try to harmonize what at that time appeared to be the discoveries and the theories of science with religion. Quite prevalent. And these tendencies of what came to be called liberal theology, which has little to do with political liberalism, this is theological liberalism, eventually aroused the ire of some people in the religious field, in the ministry, who felt that the important, or maybe the most important aspects of religion were going to be lost. And these folk then started what came to be called fundamentalism, with the slogan, let's get back to the fundamentals of religion. The fundamentals of religion in their eyes being, of course, primarily the preachments of the Bible and the various traditional interpretations attached thereto for a long period of time. And ever since